Josepha Madigan, she's a solicitor, a mediator and a family law expert. She's going to tell us about family law cases and basically that family law cases can be solved calmly and there's no need to go to court. We do need and we do want to hear from you today. Of course, thousands of people got divorced last year and quite a few ended up in the courts. Is there a way to avoid the pain and expense of that? Well, Josepha, our family law expert, she's here for the whole show. She will be taking your questions and your queries. It is a very expensive business, but she is going to show us the way through the maze.
Yes.
And the number of Irish adults who have divorced or separated in the past 25 years is over 250,000. It can be a very expensive process and a really long and drawn out affair for a lot of people. So Josepha Madigan is here with us. She's the author. She is a lawyer as well. 80,000 people went through the process last year, but you're here to tell us that it doesn't have to cost that much money and you can actually avoid the courts and the confrontations.
You can, Maura, and I think, Fiona Shackleton, who was Paul McCartney's solicitor, hit the nail on the head when she said a courtroom is a barbaric venue in which to pick over the carcass of a failed marriage.
Well, that was a very, very difficult breakup, and the court case was, of course, very public as well, wasn't it?
I think she put it quite succinctly, though, in relation to the adversarial system, for families who are going through separation or divorce. And I suppose what I am saying is that there is an alternative to that, and that would be mediation or collaborative law.
So, but say, okay, a man and a wife, or these days, men or women, your partner, if you're married to somebody, and if you come around, you say, okay, it's not working out, you can do what you want to do, and okay, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, we can go through the courts, or we can say, okay, we're just going our separate ways. And that won't, it'll be easy on your head, your heart, and on your wallet. So if you come to that agreement, how much will that cost you?
Well, I suppose each case is different, Di, so it's sort of impossible to say. I should say at the outset as well that in order to get a divorce in Ireland, you have to go into court, even if it's on consent. It has to be ruled by a court. So unlike, say, a separation where you can go by deed as opposed to a judicial separation, you do have to have it ruled by court, but it can be done on consent.
But just explain to people at home who may not know the ins and outs of the 96 Divorce Act. What are the rules and I suppose the differences between a legal separation and a divorce? Okay,
well on divorce there has to be no prospect of reconciliation between the parties. That would seem an obvious thing, but that has to be one of the criteria fulfilled. Also that you are 4 years separated out of the preceding 5 years, and also that proper provision is made for the parties. So really, those criteria have to be fulfilled. A deed of separation or a judicial separation is different in the sense that on a divorce you can remarry. And I suppose that's the chief distinction between separation and divorce in Ireland.
Okay. Cost-wise, though, if you do go to court and you have this adversarial, as you said, system that is in place, how much could you end up paying? Say if you go to the High Court and you're fighting over property and cash and all that, if that type of thing is at stake.
God, how long is a piece of string, Maura? I suppose, in the High Court, 90% of cases would go to the Circuit Court jurisdiction, but certainly there are cases that go to the High Court. You're talking thousands. 10 to 15,000, a day, perhaps, if you're engaging senior counsel, junior counsel. It's an awful lot of money. And I think there is the cost implications of going through the adversarial process, but there's also the emotional cost. And I think we're forgetting that when separating, divorcing couples, are going through this awful breakdown of their marriage, they're going through a grief, and they have, go through all of those stages. So in a way, it's a more humane way of approaching it, but both parties have to want to do it and engage it in that way.
Nicola, I suppose 80,000 last year, that's a huge number, but if you go back maybe, I think it's 20 years ago.
I don't feel so alone anymore.
You are part of the statistic. You've been there.
No, I'm absolutely a statistic. And there's no right and wrong. I mean, it's exactly as Josepha said, there's no right and no wrong. The system is the system, and it doesn't take people into consideration at all, like the emotional trauma that was spoken about. That's
like
discounted. It's just paper.
80,000, anything is huge. 80,000 euro, 80,000 spuds is huge. So 80,000 divorces, you're just throwing in with the rest of them, and it just doesn't really, as you said there.
99% of people like to think themselves as reasonable until an emotional response is thrown in the middle of it. So there's no reasonable then, and then the problem with that is that, when there is money at play and people feel aggrieved or emotionally distraught, it can go horrendously wrong.
My father gave us this piece of land, so I should take it and stuff like that.
But death and divorce are the two places that people are determined. And The problem is the process isn't people-friendly, and people want their emotional grief heard. And in the courts, your emotional grief is not heard. It's just facts, pure facts.
Black and white, that's it, yeah.
Facts. There's a precedent set.
That must be very, very hard, though.
So, well, I think for a lot of people, they expect to have all the grievances heard. When they get there, they discover it's just another process. Yeah. This is just a job to people. They don't care who you are. They don't care what your problem is.
Okay, well, I suppose really before you go into court, and I suppose this is what we want to tell our viewers about today is mediation, and what you're going to tell us all about is this collaborative law. Tell us about the process.
Yeah, collaborative law would be something you might see, for example, on The Good Wife, on these sort of programmes. These American programmes where you see two lawyers sitting down and their two clients, the warring couple, if you like, around a boardroom table. And both four parties, the four of them, enter what they call a participation agreement to stay out of court. So it takes the threat of court away from the background, and they enter sort of meaningful negotiations. However, I suppose the only drawback to it is that you can't engage the same solicitor, if you like, if you're going to go on to contentious litigation. Just to say as well about mediation and collaborative law, they are obviously voluntary dispute resolution mechanisms, and there is always a place for litigation if there's going to be abuse or any hint of domestic violence. There has to be emergency protection orders. I think that's very important.
But when you sit down with the two lawyers, say yourself in the position you were in and the other side, and the mediator, basically you will work out what you could be fighting about at great expense in a court. Isn't that right?
Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, judges do their best in difficult circumstances, but they cannot micromanage people's lives. Yeah. So why not dictate the speed of the process and have control over the outcome, both parties themselves? So I would urge...
There's no difference in the two processes, bar a length of time. And our system isn't built to make this easy. They want you to do it with due consideration to children. So the centre of everything we do, if there's children involved, is the welfare of the children. There's nothing else. Yeah. The judge isn't interested in your needs, his needs.
No. The judge, when you try to work it out,
they want what the best welfare of the kids, and everything thereafter, where the house goes, what's the best interest of the kids. The whole process is built around their children.
There's a very interesting email in here. You said that you have to go to court if you're getting a divorce, but we have a person after emailing the show and says she wants to get a divorce without involving a solicitor and the fees that go along with it. Her marriage ended in 2000 and she was legally separated since 2003. Her marriage was annulled by the Catholic Church in 2006. Basically, this lady wants a divorce. Can you go into court to get a divorce without a solicitor? I think that's what
she can certainly act as
or she.
Yeah, she can certainly act as a lay litigant. But I mean, obviously, the Law Society would always recommend independent legal advice going into divorce. I mean, there are things like pensions, and there is no clean break system here in Ireland as well. So the word divorce is a bit of a misnomer. So certainly,
is there one in other countries? Is it clear in other countries?
Yes, there is. I'm sure it's something that might be reviewed, and there might be reform in that regard down the line.
When you talk about clean break, because it is legalese, you're saying that one or either party can go back after a divorce is granted if somebody makes X amount of money in the future and look for some of that. That's basically what you're saying.
Technically speaking, however, there is case law there, Maura. There was a particular case back in 2011. It's in the statute books where the full and final settlement clause was held to be pretty watertight. So the job of the judge isn't going to redistribute any wealth. Proper provision is the key phrase, really.
How much does mediation and this collaborative law, how much will it cost people watching today that want to work it out in a non-adversarial kind of way?
Well, you're talking probably between €50 for a mediator that's probably maybe not a lawyer mediator, up to anything like to 450 for a top firm lawyer mediator. But it sounds a lot, but if you're looking at the costs of actually going to a contested court hearing, the savings are about 60% in my view.
So how much could you get a divorce for, though?
An hour.
An hour.
Yeah, an hour. How much? What is the cheapest divorce you can get in this country at the moment?
Probably, in my view, as a family law practitioner, I think the cheapest, if we're talking about financial cost only, would be to go through mediation or collaborative law and have it ruled on consent. And that's the simplest way of doing it.
Unless what are you talking about?
Have no solicitors involved at all, and go in and have it agreed.
No, I'm just wondering. I'm wondering how much, though. I know, Nicola, but are you talking about 2,000 or 3,000 or what?
Yeah, it could be. It could be absolutely, absolutely around that.
And a lot of it, just very quickly, it happens around the New Year and Christmas.
It's an unfortunate thing, isn't it? Really.
Is it people say to themselves, okay, it's the New Year coming up on the 1st of January, here we go, I'll have wipe the slate clean and go for it?
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose that if they had been contemplating maybe perhaps issuing proceedings, I mean, they're not going to send a letter to their wife or husband just before Christmas, you know, so it's quite an emotive time. So January tends to be a very busy time anecdotally anyway, certainly.
Now, Josepha's going to stay with us for the whole show, so get those questions in. Yes, you're very welcome back to the show. We are talking about divorces and the more civilised the divorce is between the couple, the easier and it is on the head, the heart and the wallet. And we have loads of people getting in contact with the show. Stephen emailed the show, says, what happens when your wife, a foreign national, lives in a foreign country and has no intention of returning ever? How does a divorce work then?
Yeah, that would be a difficulty, and you know, he should get proper legal advice in relation to it. But in general terms, he would first of all see if he could establish an address to have the person served or his wife served with the papers. But eventually, he may be able to get a divorce in absentia. But he would need to get proper legal advice in relation to that, the exact circumstances.
Keep those questions coming in. We've really interesting ones. Can a divorce be granted if you've been separated for 4 or 5 years, but my ex won't cooperate? We get the answer to that question.
We are talking about divorce here today, actually, on a more serious note. We have a solicitor with us today. Can we just one question that a lot of people are, Josepha, are ringing in and texting in to ask about DIY divorce. John got in touch. He said, I used DIY divorce and the divorce was amicable and no pensions or property involved. Is there such a thing?
There is such a thing, and there are companies that do DIY divorces, but obviously I would say proceed with caution. I mean, it's not going to replace independent legal advice, and often they might act for both people. You know, I have concerns about the potholes down the road in relation to it.
Okay. Yeah. What about somebody else got in touch and they said that if one person basically is unfaithful, will that affect the fact you're going to court when you're getting a legal separation?
Unfortunately, Maura, this is one of the myths that need to be dispelled, and Section 20 of the 1996 Act talks about conduct and whether or not it should be taken into account. And they say that it should only be taken into account if it's unjust to disregard it. But conduct
is not taken into account.
Well, I would say in general, in most circumstances, an affair won't be taken into account. A simple run-of-the-mill affair, if you like, if there's such a thing. But gross and obvious behaviour will be taken into account, and ancillary relief orders can be made on that basis.
But in general, no is the answer.
No. Okay. I would say no.
We are talking about divorce today, and actually we have family law expert Josepha Madigan with us. Josepha, so many texts coming in, because of course we're talking about, what is it, 80,000 people?
Yes, I suppose, yeah.
Divorced
I think that was the statistic from the census, yeah.
And how many years in the last?
In 2011, I think
2011.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. One here, is an English divorce recognised by the Irish courts?
It will be recognised under Brussels II if there's a common nationality between the parties and if either party was habitually resident in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
The foreign,
also, I mentioned this earlier on. Can a divorce be granted if you've been separated for 4 or 5 years, but the ex won't cooperate?
Yeah, you can't stop somebody divorcing you, Dahi.
But you can prolong the whole...
You can make it difficult. But
is there any period of time, OK, there's 10 years, OK, the other person has to sit down. Is there any time limits like that or anything?
No, there's no time limit like that, but you can, there's motions that you can bring in court. I don't want to get too legalese about it, you know, to get somebody to engage in the process,
my sister, this is Alison via email to us, my sister is currently going through the process of mediation. She has another 2.5 years before she qualifies for divorce. Surely waiting 4 years is completely out of date. This is the law in Ireland that you have to be separated.
You know, I have to say I agree with that, and I sit on the Law Society Family Law Committee, and one of the proposals we put to the Law Reform Commission is in relation to that point, because if you're, I think, you know, people that are separated have to wait 4 years before they can get divorced.
Does it need a referendum to change?
Possibly.
Yeah.
4 years is a long time.
It is ridiculous.
And it is really, in other jurisdictions, it's even in Britain, it's probably about a year or so, is it, Josepha?
It is, yeah, and exactly. And in America, the same, depending on the state. But it's also 2 sets of costs, and then having to go through the tedium, you know, the acrimony again for everybody, and swearing affidavits and means. So, no, I do think that has to be overhauled.
Because I'd imagine, say, people want closure, you know, say 4 years. Could just you go through the emotional breakup first, and then, OK, you've actually separated. Both parties are going separate directions, but still they can't get a divorce for years.
And as Josepha said as well, the clean break system, which we don't have a clean break system in this country. So that's another thing that should be addressed.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, divorces will be in 17 years only if you look at it that way in June of this year. So I suppose the rationale behind the 4-year gap was maybe you know, because it was only by 0.5% in the referendum that was actually passed. So sort of get our heads around that, you know.
Okay, but Josepha, we're primarily talking about mediation and collaborative law. Give us a mention of your book.
Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Ireland by Josepha Madigan. It's available in Hodges and Fidgets and online.
Lovely stuff. Ladies, thank you very much for being with us today.
Correctly.